No one expected a wild bobcat to walk into a hospital carrying a blood-stained black bag. It began on a winter night no one in Silverpine will ever forget. A wounded bobcat limped through the blizzard, dragging a black bag into a quiet mountain hospital. Doctors froze as it collapsed at their feet. And inside that bag, they discovered something that would change every life in the room. By dawn, the line between man and wild would never be the same again. The night had settled over Silverpine like a heavy quilt of white. Snow whispered against the windows of Silverpine Medical Center, the only hospital in the small mountain town, its lights glowing faintly through the storm. Inside, the halls were quiet, just the hum of fluorescent bulbs and the distant rhythm of the overnight heart monitors. It was supposed to be an ordinary winter night. Dr. Lauren Hayes rubbed her eyes as she filled out the last of the evening reports. The ER had been slow since sunset, just a handful of slips on the ice, a flu case, nothing unusual. She'd even started thinking about heating up the leftover soup waiting in the staff fridge. A few nurses chatted softly by the reception desk. Jake Turner, the night security guard, leaned back in his chair, humming quietly to the old radio he kept by his feet. Then, at 11:47 p.m., the automatic glass doors at the front entrance slid open with a hiss. Cold air rushed in, followed by silence. Lauren looked up, expecting to see a late-night patient or maybe a paramedic. Instead, every person in the lobby froze. From the darkness outside, through the swirl of falling snow, came the unmistakable shape of an animal, a bobcat. It moved slowly, each step leaving a smear of red on the tile. Its fur, once tawny gold, was soaked and clumped together with blood. The creature's sides heaved as it dragged something heavy behind it. A black bag, slick with ice and dirt, gripped tight in its jaws. "What in the world?" Jake whispered, half rising from his chair. The nurses backed up, eyes wide, one of them instinctively reaching for the phone. The animal didn't snarl, didn't lunge. It simply stood there under the harsh fluorescent light, trembling. Its golden eyes scanned the room, wild but strangely steady, almost searching. Lauren felt her pulse quicken. Instinct told her to stay back, but something in those eyes rooted her in place. The bobcat wasn't attacking. It was pleading. Blood streaked the floor as the animal staggered forward a few feet, the black bag scraping behind it with a faint metallic clink. The sound was oddly human, a noise that belonged in an operating room, not from the mouth of a wild creature. Jake stepped forward cautiously. "Dr. Hayes, you'd better get back," he warned. His hand hovered over his radio. "It's hurt," Lauren said quietly. "Look at its leg." The animal's right hind limb was bent at an odd angle, blood soaking into the thick fur around the joint. But despite the injury, it refused to drop the bag. It crouched low, head tilted upward, and let out a sound none of them had ever heard from a wild cat before. A low, broken cry that echoed through the lobby like a call for help. Everyone froze. Should I call animal control?" one of the nurses whispered. Lauren shook her head slowly. "No sudden movements. Let's just see what it wants." Jake's brow furrowed. "It's a bobcat, Doc. It doesn't want anything from us except to get out of here." But Lauren wasn't so sure. She took a cautious step closer, keeping her voice low. "Easy now," she murmured. "You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." The animal's ears twitched. It didn't back away. Lauren's shoes left faint wet prints on the tile as she approached. The air felt heavy, electric. She stopped a few feet away and crouched slightly, trying to make herself smaller. The bobcat's breath came in short, shaky bursts, misting the air. "What's in that bag?" Jake muttered under his breath. "I don't know," Lauren said softly. "But whatever it is, it came here for a reason." The bobcat blinked slowly, its gaze locked on hers. Then, as if it had reached its limit, it lowered the bag gently onto the floor. Its body sagged. A thin trail of blood dripped from its paw. Lauren's heart pounded. "It's collapsing!" The animal let out one final weak exhale and slumped sideways, landing beside the black bag with a dull thud. The sound broke whatever trance had held the room. Nurse Clara hurried forward with a towel, but Lauren raised a hand. "Careful. Let's not scare it if it's still conscious." Jake knelt beside her, eyes darting between the cat and the bag. "It's not attacking. That's odd. You ever see one do something like this?" "Never," Lauren whispered. She glanced around. "Get me some gloves. And a flashlight." She crouched lower, close enough now to smell the animal. A mix of pine, iron, and cold. The bobcat's breathing was shallow. Its fur twitched slightly under the fluorescent light. "Poor thing," Clara murmured, kneeling beside them. "How did it even make it here in this weather?" Lauren didn't answer. Her eyes were on the black bag. The material was torn near one corner, the zipper streaked with dried blood. As she reached for it, a faint metallic sound came from inside, like glass tapping against steel. She froze. Jake tensed beside her. "You hear that?" Lauren nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's not random." For a long moment, none of them moved. The snowstorm outside howled against the windows, a white blur of wind and ice, but inside, everything was still. Just the three of them, the injured bobcat, and the strange blood-stained bag. Lauren took a deep breath and reached out again, her hand trembling slightly. "Whatever's inside," she said softly, "it brought it here for a reason." The bobcat's tail twitched once, weakly, as if it understood. Lauren's fingers brushed the edge of the bag. She looked at Jake. "If this thing gets up, grab the gate by the doors. Don't let anyone near." Jake nodded, eyes locked on the animal. Lauren eased the zipper open just a few inches. A thin line of red stained her gloves. She saw the glint of something metallic inside, then something white, folded. Before she could see more, the bobcat let out a sudden, low growl, not of anger, but warning. It lifted its head, eyes burning with effort, and fixed them on hers again. For an instant, Lauren thought she saw recognition there, almost human in its intensity. And then, just as suddenly, it dropped its head to the floor and went still. The faint echo of the zipper's sound lingered in the sterile air. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, endless, and silent, while inside, the black bag waited like a secret between life and death. Lauren exhaled shakily. "We're not calling animal control," she said finally. "Not yet." Jake frowned. "Then what do we do?" Lauren looked down at the bobcat's motionless body and the dark smear it had left across the tile. "We find out who, or what, it was trying to save." The lights flickered once as the storm deepened, and the hospital fell quiet again, holding its breath for whatever would come next. Jake stood beside her, one hand gripping his flashlight, the other hovering uncertainly over his radio. The nurses in the lobby whispered nervously from behind the counter. Outside, the wind howled against the glass doors, driving snow sideways in white sheets. Lauren pressed two fingers gently against the bobcat's neck. "Still alive," she murmured. The faint pulse beneath her glove was weak, fluttering, but there. Barely. Clara knelt next to her, eyes full of sympathy. "Should we call animal control or wildlife rescue?" "Not yet," Lauren said softly. "Something's wrong here. That bag, it came for a reason." Jake crouched and aimed the flashlight at the black bag. "I still say this is crazy," he muttered. "Wildcats don't carry luggage into hospitals." Lauren ignored the sarcasm. The bag sat half open on the blood-smeared floor, the torn zipper glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. She hesitated only a second before unzipping it farther. Inside was a strange collection of things. Medical supplies, some wrapped in plastic, others loose and stained with dirt. A small roll of gauze, a half-empty vial, a sterile syringe still in its wrapper, and folded in one corner, a blood-soaked scrap of paper. Lauren lifted it carefully with tweezers from a tray Clara brought over. The words were smeared, shaky, but still legible. Help her, mother in the woods, follow the cat. Lauren froze. Clara's voice came out in a whisper. You think it's a prank? Jake frowned. You kidding? Someone's bleeding out somewhere, and their cat's doing the calling? But Lauren's mind was racing. The handwriting was faint but familiar. She had seen it before, on a patient file months earlier. Aaron Cole, she said quietly, almost to herself. Jake blinked. Who? Dr. Aaron Cole, Lauren repeated. Biologist. He worked with the wildlife reserve just north of here. There was a report last week. Truck found wrecked near the ridge, no body recovered. Clara's eyes widened. You think this cat belonged to him? I don't think, Lauren said, her voice firm now. I know. She looked at the bobcat's limp body. The poor thing's fur was matted with ice and blood, one leg twisted wrong, but its expression, even in unconsciousness, seemed peaceful, like an exhausted messenger that had finally delivered its message. Jake scratched the back of his neck. Okay, Doc, let's say you're right. What's our next move? We can't just take off into the storm chasing ghosts. Lauren stood, folding the note carefully into her pocket. We don't have time to wait for daylight. If that note's real, someone's in trouble right now, and they trusted this animal to lead us. Jake shook his head. You really think it's trying to guide us somewhere? Come on, that's... A low, ragged sound interrupted him. The bobcat stirred. Its body twitched once, then again. It let out a weak, rasping breath, eyes fluttering open. Lauren knelt immediately. Hey, easy. You're safe here. The animal's pupils widened against the bright light, its gaze locking onto her. For a moment she swore it recognized her voice. It shifted slightly, trying to rise, but its injured leg gave out. Instead, it pawed weakly at the bag, claws scraping the floor. Jake took a step back. Nope, not doing this again. But Lauren's tone was calm. Look at it. It's not attacking. It's showing us something. The bobcat's paw nudged the torn strap, dragging it an inch toward the hallway. Then it looked up again, chest rising and falling fast. It wants us to follow, Lauren whispered. Jake exhaled sharply. You've got to be kidding me. Clara bit her lip. Lauren, what if there's really someone out there? What if that's why it came? Lauren stood, grabbing her stethoscope and coat. Then we're not ignoring it. She looked at Jake. Lock down the entrance and clear the lobby. If this storm gets worse, I don't want anyone else wandering in. He hesitated, glancing between her and the animal. You sure about this? Positive, she said. Call the ranger station. Tell them we may have a rescue in progress near Ridge Trail. Jake hesitated, then nodded and moved toward the desk. The phone line crackled with static, connection fading in and out with the storm. Lauren turned back to Clara. Help me get it onto a stretcher. We'll stabilize it in the ER. Clara's eyebrows shot up. You want to treat a bobcat? Lauren met her eyes. We treat whoever comes through that door. With slow, careful movements, they rolled the injured animal onto a towel-lined stretcher. The bobcat didn't resist. It just stared at Lauren with that same strange intensity. When they wheeled it into the emergency bay, the room seemed to hold a silence unlike any other. The hum of machines, the faint beep of monitors, it all felt smaller somehow. Lauren cleaned the wound on its leg with warm saline, whispering softly to keep it calm. "You did good getting here," she murmured. "We'll take it from here." Clara handed her the instruments. "Pulse is steadying. Whatever it's been through, it's tough." Lauren smiled faintly. "They always are." She finished wrapping the bandage and stood back. For a moment, she simply watched it breathe. Something about the scene, a wild creature lying on a hospital gurney under human care, felt impossibly symbolic. Then Jake reappeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Dispatch says they're getting garbled radio traffic from the ridge. Something about a missing person. Maybe two. Snow knocked out cell towers, so they can't confirm." Lauren's stomach tightened. "Then we're not waiting. Soon as the roads are clear enough, I'm heading out with a team." Jake frowned. "You're not going alone." Clara looked between them. "You'll need at Mahone, least one EMT and someone who knows the back roads." Lauren nodded, already mentally assembling the team. "Fine. Nate Graham's on duty tonight, right? He's the senior ranger." Jake confirmed with a nod. "Yeah, he's patrolling the south line. I can reach him on the secure channel." "Do it," she said. "Tell him to bring chains, lights, and thermal blankets." The wind screamed outside, rattling the windows. The power flickered again. The bobcat stirred, head lifting weakly. Its gaze followed the sound of the storm, as if it knew that out there, somewhere, someone still needed saving. Lauren stepped closer, resting a hand gently near its shoulder. "We'll go," she whispered. "I promise." It blinked once, slowly, as if it understood. She turned to Clara. "Get the emergency bag ready. We'll take this one with us when we leave." Clara hesitated. "You really think it can lead us there?" Lauren looked at the animal, its breath fogging faintly against the sterile air. "I think it already has." For a while, the only sound in the room was the soft beep of the monitor and the muffled roar of the wind. Jake returned with an update. Nate was on his way in a snowplow truck, fighting through near-zero visibility. Estimated arrival, 20 minutes. Lauren leaned against the counter, eyes on the unconscious bobcat. Every instinct she had as a doctor told her this story didn't make sense, but something deeper, something human, told her to trust it anyway. Outside, lightning flashed somewhere beyond the mountains, turning the falling snow into a cascade of silver. The world felt suspended between logic and faith. Jake rubbed his hands together for warmth. "You know, this'll sound crazy, but I think it wanted you specifically." Lauren glanced at him. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged, embarrassed. "Just the way it looked at you, like it knew you'd understand." Lauren didn't answer. She turned back to the bobcat, the steady rhythm of its breathing filling the silence. Maybe, she thought, it wasn't about understanding at all. Maybe it was just about listening. The storm outside swelled, shaking the windows again, as if urging them to hurry. She reached down, zipped the black bag closed, and set it beside the stretcher. The words from the note echoed in her mind. "Help her. Mother in the woods." Lauren looked toward the door. "We leave as soon as Nate gets here." Jake nodded, his face grim. "Then I'll keep the lights on till you're back." As the power flickered once more and the snow piled higher against the glass, the strange stillness of the night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a faint cry carried through the wind, too soft to place, too human to ignore. Lauren froze, her hand still on the bag. Clara turned toward her. "Did you hear that?" Lauren's eyes met hers. "Yes," she whispered, "and I think that's who we're going to find." Outside, the storm swallowed the town whole, and inside Silverpine Medical Center, the black bag sat between them, a mystery that had just begun to unfold. The hospital's emergency lights hummed faintly as the power flickered again. Snow piled against the glass doors, turning the world beyond into a blur of white and wind. Lauren paced near the window, unable to shake the sound she thought she'd heard, a cry so faint it could have been imagination. But her gut told her it wasn't. Jake's voice came from behind the reception desk. "Ranger Graham's on the line. Says he's 20 minutes out if the road doesn't close." "Tell him to meet me at the east entrance," Lauren replied without hesitation. "We'll head toward Ridge Trail." Jake hesitated. "You're really doing this, huh?" Lauren nodded. "If someone's alive out there, we can't just sit here and hope for a miracle." Clara zipped her parka, tucking the emergency kit under one arm. "Then let's make sure we're the miracle they get." Lauren almost smiled at that, but worry clouded her face as she turned back toward the ER bay. The Bobcat was awake again, barely, but its eyes tracked her as she entered. The animal's breathing had steadied, though its body trembled with exhaustion. She crouched beside it. "We're going," she murmured. "You brought the message. We'll finish it." The Bobcat blinked once, slow and deliberate. Lauren looked up as Clara joined her. "Can we move it safely?" "I wouldn't risk taking it far," Clara said, checking the IV line she'd set up. "But if it calms down, maybe it can ride in the truck with us. Something tells me it won't stay behind anyway." Lauren nodded slowly. "Then we'll take it." The front doors burst open with a rush of cold air, scattering papers across the floor. Jake shouted over the wind, "He's here!" Ranger Nate Graham stomped the snow from his boots as he entered, his heavy coat dusted white. His face was weathered from years in the mountains, calm, serious, the kind of man who didn't panic easily. But even he blinked when he saw the animal on the gurney. "You've got to be kidding," he said. "That's the cat from the Cole property." Lauren straightened. "You've seen it before?" "Yeah," Nate replied. "It's been spotted near the ridge for years. Locals say Dr. Aaron Cole rescued it as a cub. They were inseparable until he disappeared." He studied the bandage around its leg. "Guess now we know where it went." Lauren handed him the folded note. "We found this in the bag it brought." Nate read the blood-streaked words silently, his jaw tightening. "Help her. Mother in the woods. Follow the cat." He looked up. "You think this is from Aaron?" "I know it is," Lauren said. "He signed it AC. He was trying to get help for someone. His wife, maybe." Nate exhaled, running a hand over his beard. "If that's true, she's been out there for days. With weather like this, the clock's already run out for most." "Not if she has medical supplies," Lauren said. "There's formula in the bag and insulin. He must have packed it before—" "Before whatever happened," Nate finished for her. He turned toward the doors. "All right, I've got chains on the truck, floodlights, and radios, but the roads are rough. You sure you want to do this?" Lauren's answer was immediate. "Yes." Clara was already loading the medical kit into a duffel. "Then let's move." The team gathered what they needed: thermal blankets, portable oxygen, emergency heat packs. The Bobcat stirred weakly as they prepared to leave. When Lauren moved the stretcher, it gave a low, rumbling sound, a warning or a plea she couldn't tell. "We'll bring you," she said softly. "You've come this far." They loaded it into the back seat of Nate's snowplow truck, securing the cage with straps. Outside, the storm had grown worse, the air thick with white flakes that turned the headlights into faint halos. As the vehicle rumbled to life, Lauren climbed into the passenger seat. "How far to the ridge?" 5 miles, Nate said, gripping the wheel. "But it'll feel like 50 in this weather." The hospital lights disappeared behind them as they crawled up the mountain road, tires crunching through fresh drifts. The radio crackled with static, occasionally spitting out bits of dispatch chatter. Clara, sitting in the back beside the cage, watched the Bobcat's steady breathing. "It's strange," she said quietly. "It's not afraid of us." Lauren glanced back. Maybe it knows we're going where it wants us to. Nate shot her a skeptical look. You really believe this animal understands what's happening? I don't know what I believe, Lauren admitted. But Dr. Cole trusted it. That's enough for me. For a long while, no one spoke. The truck rocked with every gust of wind. The forest loomed on either side, dark and silent, branches heavy with snow. Then, through the static of the radio, a faint signal broke through. Distress, ridge trail, repeat, vehicle overturned, female unconscious, coordinates. The transmission cut out before finishing. Nate gripped the mic. This is Ranger Graham responding. Repeat location. Only static replied. Clara leaned forward. That was real. Someone's alive. Lauren looked down at the note again. The ink blurred but still visible. Help her. Mother in the woods. Her chest tightened. He was right. They're still out there. The bobcat stirred, pressing its nose against the cage. Its eyes caught the faint reflection of the headlights, glowing amber like coals in the dark. It gave a sharp, guttural sound, a sound that made the hair on the back of Lauren's neck stand up. Nate slowed the truck. What's it doing? It's alerting us, Lauren said quietly. Something's ahead. The road curved sharply, revealing a fallen pine tree blocking the lane. Nate cursed under his breath and braked hard. The cone. Tires skidded slightly before finding traction. Looks fresh, he muttered. Must have gone down an hour ago. They stepped out into the storm, the wind cutting through their coats. Nate grabbed an axe from the truck bed while Lauren checked the flashlight. Snow whipped around them in chaotic spirals. As they cleared a path, Clara shouted over the wind, Lauren, look! Down the embankment, half buried in snow, was a trail, faint but unmistakable. Tracks. Lauren aimed her light downward. They weren't human. Paw prints. And beside them, faint drag marks. Nate joined her, following the line with his eyes. That's our cat's trail. Looks like it came from that direction. Lauren's pulse quickened. Then that's where we go. They grabbed the supplies, leaving the truck idling with the hazards flashing like beacons in the storm. The snow came nearly to their knees as they followed the narrow path through the trees. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of their boots, the distant creak of ice-laden branches, the wind moaning through the pines. After 15 minutes, Nate raised a hand for silence. Hear that? At first, there was nothing but wind. Then, faintly, a soft cry, high-pitched, wavering, a baby. Lauren's heart dropped into her stomach. Clara, did you hear? I heard it. They pushed faster through the snow. The sound faded, then returned, carried by the wind like an echo from another world. The bobcat inside the truck cage gave a low growl, pressing against the bars. Lauren turned back toward the truck, her voice trembling. We're close. It knows where. But when she faced forward again, she saw something else. Something that froze her mid-step. Half buried beneath a snow-laden branch was a torn jacket sleeve, bright orange against the white. The patch on the arm read, Wildlife Research Unit. Lauren knelt and brushed away the snow. Her fingers touched something hard. A flashlight, cracked but still faintly glowing. Clara swallowed hard. It's his. It has to be. Nate looked toward the dark line of trees beyond. Then we're not far from the crash site. A cold gust blew through, carrying the faint scent of fuel and iron. Lauren stood, her face pale but determined. Let's move. Now! They pressed deeper into the woods, the wind howling louder, like the mountain itself urging them onward. Behind them, the truck engine idled, headlights flickering through the storm. Inside the cab, the bobcat lifted its head, staring into the blizzard with unblinking eyes, its breath fogging the glass. It let out a sound halfway between a growl and a cry, as though reminding them of the promise made inside that hospital. The path narrowed, hemmed in by twisted trees heavy with snow. Lauren led the way, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Each step felt heavier, the cold biting through layers of fabric. Then, suddenly, the beam caught a glint of metal through the trees. Distorted reflection buried under white. "There," Lauren gasped. "That's it." The three of them broke into a run, stumbling through the drifts until the shape became clear. A pickup truck overturned in a shallow ravine, its roof crushed, the back window shattered. Steam hissed faintly from the hood. Lauren's voice caught. "Oh my God!" They slid down the embankment, snow collapsing beneath their boots. The cab door was half buried, the windshield fractured into a web of glass. Inside, a woman's hand pressed weakly against the dashboard before falling limp. "She's alive!" Clara shouted. Lauren dropped to her knees beside the door. "Hang on! We're here!" Nate yanked at the handle until it gave way, and the door creaked open. The freezing air rushed in. The woman's face was pale, her lips blue, but her chest rose faintly with each breath. Wrapped in her arms was a tiny bundle, a baby, silent and still. Lauren's throat tightened as she reached forward. "Oh no!" Behind them, through the roaring wind, the distant sound of a cry answered. The unmistakable voice of the Bobcat from the truck, echoing through the storm as if calling out to them, "Hurry!" And in that moment, with the world frozen around them, Dr. Lauren Hayes knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was only the beginning. The wind tore across the ridge, slicing through their coats like knives. Snowflakes stung their faces, and the cold bit into exposed skin. Lauren steadied herself against the side of the overturned truck, her breath coming out in sharp white bursts. "Clara, check the baby first," she said, voice trembling but firm. Clara knelt quickly beside the woman's motionless arms, unwrapping the soaked blanket. The tiny form inside was pale and silent. She pressed 2 fingers to the baby's neck, searching desperately. For a long moment, there was nothing. No movement. No sound. Then a faint, fluttering pulse brushed her fingertips. "She's alive," Clara gasped. "Barely, but alive." Lauren's heart lurched. "Good. Keep her warm." She turned to Nate. "We need to stabilize the mother. Now." Nate crouched at the driver's side, his flashlight cutting through the shattered glass. The woman's leg was pinned beneath the crushed steering column, blood staining her torn jeans. Her face was ghostly pale. "She's trapped," he said grimly. "If we move her wrong, we could make it worse." Lauren crawled closer, gloved hands brushing away shards of ice and glass. "Listen to me," she said softly to the unconscious woman. "We're here to help you. We're not leaving you here." The woman didn't stir, but her breathing hitched, proof that she was still fighting. Lauren looked up. "Clara, what's the baby's condition?" "Hypothermic, weak pulse. I need warmth and glucose, fast." Lauren tore open the black bag, pulling out what little the Bobcat had carried through the storm. A small vial of insulin, a wrapped syringe, a rolled blanket, and 2 bottles of formula. "There's not much here, but it's something." Nate leaned closer, snow melting on his collar. "You really think that animal brought all this for them?" Lauren didn't answer. She glanced back toward the truck parked up the hill. The headlights glowed faintly through the snow, and inside the cab, the Bobcat's silhouette was barely visible. It sat upright, watching them, its golden eyes shining through the storm like tiny lanterns. She swallowed hard. "I think it did exactly that." Clara used the emergency heating pack to warm the baby's tiny body, wrapping her in the dry blanket from the bag. The child whimpered, a fragile sound, but enough to make everyone freeze in relief. "There it is," Clara whispered. "She's coming back." Lauren pressed her hand gently against the baby's chest, feeling the weak rhythm strengthen beneath her palm. She blinked back tears that instantly froze on her lashes. Nate tapped her shoulder. "We've got a bigger problem. The mother's bleeding out. We can't pull her free with the column still on her leg." Lauren looked up, her medical instincts kicking in. "I need my trauma shears and the saline from the pack." Nate grabbed the supplies. Lauren worked quickly, cutting through the woman's clothing to expose the wound. "She's losing too much blood. If we don't stop it, she won't last another 20 minutes. Clara looked at her over the baby's shoulder. "We can't call for help out here. No signal." Lauren glanced at Nate. "Can your radio reach dispatch?" He shook his head. "Not in this canyon. We're too low." The reality hit like a punch. They were alone, halfway up a mountain, with a dying mother, a freezing baby, and a storm closing in. Lauren took a deep breath. "Then we make our own luck." She reached for the field bandage and wrapped the woman's leg tightly, pressing her palm over the wound until the bleeding slowed. The woman moaned weakly. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed and unfocused. "Hey," Lauren said softly, leaning close. "Stay with me. You're safe now." The woman's lips moved, barely audible. "The baby. Please. She's okay," Lauren reassured her. "She's with us." The woman's eyes filled with tears. He said the cat would find help." Lauren's breath caught. "Aaron?" The woman gave the faintest nod, then slipped back into unconsciousness. Clara looked at Lauren, stunned. "She knew." "She did," Lauren whispered, "and she trusted him." Nate's voice broke through. "Doc, the storm's getting worse. We can't stay here much longer." Lauren looked around. The snow was piling higher by the minute, filling the ravine like quicksand. The truck's roof creaked under the weight. "We'll have to move them. We can't wait for a rescue team. They'll never reach us in time." Nate frowned. "We can't carry both up that hill in this weather." Lauren turned her flashlight back toward the path they'd come from. "We're not going back to the road. We'll cut through the forest. Shorter, less exposed." "That's suicide," Nate said flatly. "Maybe," she replied, "but it's our only chance." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Clara adjusted the blanket around the baby and said quietly, "Then we go." Together they lifted the woman out of the wreck, using the blanket as a makeshift stretcher. She groaned softly, but didn't wake. The baby, swaddled tight against Clara's chest, whimpered again before falling silent. They started moving through the trees, each step sinking deep into the snow. Nate led the way with a lantern, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark like a thread of gold. Lauren followed behind, supporting the stretcher with one arm and clutching the black bag with the other. The storm roared around them, but somewhere in the chaos, another sound echoed, a faint, rhythmic crunch. Lauren turned her head. Behind them, emerging from the swirling snow, was the bobcat. It limped heavily, its injured leg dragging, but it was there, following them, matching their pace. Its fur was caked with ice, its breath fogging the air. Clara gasped softly. "It came after us." Lauren felt something tighten in her chest. "No," she said quietly. "It's leading us." The animal moved ahead a few steps, pausing to glance back, as if making sure they followed. Then it veered slightly to the left, toward a narrow ridge partially shielded from the wind. "This way," Lauren said. "It's showing us shelter." Nate hesitated but followed. The path dipped downward, leading into a grove of fir trees where the snow was thinner. The storm's howl faded slightly, muffled by the thick branches above. They reached a small clearing, just enough space to lay the woman down. Lauren knelt beside her, checking her vitals. "She's fading again. We need warmth, now." Clara tore open another heat pack and tucked it beneath the blanket. Nate started gathering dry branches for a fire, using his survival lighter to spark the first flame. It flickered weakly, then caught, sending a golden glow across their faces. The bobcat settled near the fire, its sides rising and falling heavily. Its eyes gleamed in the firelight, watchful, unwavering. Lauren met its gaze. "You really did this, didn't you?" she murmured. "You saved them." The animal blinked slowly, as if in answer. The flames grew stronger, pushing back the cold. For the first time since they'd left the hospital, Lauren allowed herself to breathe. But the relief didn't last long. Nate stepped away from the fire, scanning the darkness. "Something's wrong," he muttered. Lauren stood. "What is it?" He gestured toward the ridgeline. "The wind's shifting. That means the temperature's about to drop again, and if it does, this fire won't hold." Clara's voice trembled. "We can't move them again. Not yet." Lauren looked at the unconscious woman, then at the baby sleeping in Clara's arms. "Then we hold out as long as we can." She crouched beside the bobcat, whose breathing had become shallow again. It looked exhausted, its head resting on its paws. Lauren reached out, her gloved fingers brushing lightly against its fur. "Rest now," she whispered. "You've done enough." The animal didn't move, but its tail twitched once, faintly. For the next hour, they huddled around the fire, feeding it branch by branch. The storm raged above them, but within their circle of light, there was a fragile peace, a heartbeat of hope in the middle of chaos. Then, just as Lauren began to believe they might make it, a deep, distant rumble rolled through the forest. Nate's head snapped up. "Avalanche," he said, voice tight. "Up the north face." Clara clutched the baby tighter. "Is it coming this way?" Nate listened. The rumble grew louder, closer, echoing through the valley like thunder. His face went pale. "Yes." Lauren looked around frantically. "There's nowhere to run." The bobcat lifted its head suddenly, eyes wide. It stood, unsteady but alert, and darted toward a narrow opening in the rock wall behind them, half hidden by snow and roots. It turned back, gave a sharp cry, and disappeared inside. Lauren's eyes widened. "It's found a cave!" "Move!" Nate shouted. They grabbed the woman and the baby, scrambling toward the gap as the roar grew deafening. Snow and debris cascaded down the slope behind them. Lauren ducked inside the narrow opening, just as a wall of white thundered past, shaking the ground beneath them. Inside the small cavern, darkness swallowed them. For a long time, none of them spoke. Only the sound of their breathing filled the space. Then, faintly, from deeper in the cave, came a low, rhythmic sound, the bobcat, alive, breathing, guiding them still. Lauren pressed a hand against the cold rock wall, her heart pounding. She turned to Nate and Clara, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We're not just following it," she said. "It's protecting us." The wind howled outside, but inside that hidden space, surrounded by stone and shadows, the world finally held still. The storm would rage for hours, but for now, for this fragile moment, they were safe. And as Lauren listened to the soft, steady sound of the baby breathing beside the mother, and the quiet, watchful rumble of the bobcat in the dark, she understood something she couldn't yet explain. The line between the wild and the human wasn't a wall at all. It was a thread, thin, trembling, but unbreakable. Nate's flashlight cast a weak glow across the cave walls. The flicker revealed rough rock, patches of ice, and narrow veins of quartz glinting like tiny stars. Snow had sealed the entrance almost completely, muting the wind's roar to a low moan. The air was cold but still, thick with the mingled scent of pine sap, damp earth, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Lauren sat close to the injured mother, pressing 2 fingers against her neck. "She's still with us," she said softly. Pulse is faint, but steady. Clara adjusted the baby's blanket, tucking it closer to her chest. The tiny girl let out a soft sigh, a fragile sound that seemed impossibly alive against the backdrop of wilderness and snow. Nate knelt near the entrance, peering through a small gap in the packed snow. "Storm's still bad," he said. "But once the wind shifts, we might get a window to move." Lauren nodded, though her eyes stayed on the mother. "How long do we have before the temperature drops again?" "An hour, maybe less," Nate replied. "We can't stay here all night." The bobcat lifted its head from where it lay near the fire pit Nate had managed to coax to life with dry bark and cloth scraps. Its golden eyes reflected the flame's light, unblinking, ancient. Lauren felt the weight of that gaze and, for reasons she couldn't name, spoke aloud. "You found us shelter. You saved her life." The bobcat's ears twitched. It didn't move closer, but it didn't retreat either. Nate gave a quiet chuckle under his breath. "You're talking to it like it understands you." Lauren met his eyes. "Maybe it does." He didn't argue. Something about the night, the storm, the rescue, the eerie persistence of the animal had dulled his skepticism. "Whatever the case," he said, "we'll need to head toward the ridge once it's safe. Ridge Trail connects back to the main road near the old research post. If Aaron Cole was working out there, there might be supplies." Clara frowned. "You mean his old station? I thought it was shut down." "It was," Nate said, "but the Forest Service never cleared it out. If there's power left in the generator, we could radio from there." Lauren considered it. "That's a 2-hour hike in good weather." "In this weather," Nate said grimly, "it'll feel like forever." The mother stirred faintly, pulling their attention back. Her lips moved, forming a name barely audible over the crackle of the fire. "Aaron." Lauren leaned closer. "Yes," she whispered. "You're safe. Your baby's safe. We're going to get you both out." The woman's eyelids fluttered open. Her voice was dry and weak, each word a struggle. He told me, if anything happened, the cat would find help." Lauren's throat tightened. "It did. It found us." The woman's eyes welled with tears before exhaustion pulled her back under. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the steady crackle of the fire and the wind pressing against the snow-sealed walls. Then, without warning, a low rumble rolled through the cave floor. The flame flickered. Snow dust drifted from the ceiling. "What was that?" Clara whispered. Nate froze, listening. Not an avalanche. Something else. Deeper. The bobcat rose suddenly, tail stiff, ears pricked forward. It stared toward the back of the cave where the darkness thickened into pitch. A low growl rumbled from its chest. Lauren grabbed her flashlight and shined it into the shadows. The beam stretched across uneven rock, narrowing into a jagged tunnel that disappeared deeper underground. "There's another passage," she said. "Maybe we're not alone," Nate muttered. Clara shivered. "Don't say that." But the sound came again. A faint, metallic clink, like steel brushing against stone. Lauren's pulse quickened. "That sound. It's the same as in the bag." The bobcat moved closer to the tunnel, head low, muscles tense. For a moment, Lauren thought it would attack whatever was inside, but instead it stopped and looked back at her, eyes steady, expectant. "It wants us to follow," she said. Nate frowned. "Follow it where? That tunnel could collapse, or worse." But before he could finish, the animal padded forward into the dark, its shape swallowed by shadows. Lauren hesitated only a moment, then grabbed her flashlight and started after it. "Stay here and keep them warm," she told Clara. "Nate, we With me. Nate swore softly, but followed. You're either the bravest or craziest doctor I've ever met. They moved cautiously through the tunnel, their lights cutting thin cones through the blackness. The air grew colder, the smell of rock and ice sharper. After 50 yards, the space opened into a wider chamber, an old mining pocket, long abandoned. Lauren's light swept across the walls, catching something that made her stop. A broken lantern, a torn jacket, and a rusted toolbox stenciled with faded letters. Wildlife Research Unit. Nate knelt beside it, brushing away dust. Inside were scattered tools, a cracked radio, and a laminated ID badge half buried beneath rubble. He lifted it slowly. Dr. Aaron Cole. Lauren's breath caught. Oh my God. This was his station. Nate exhaled. Then he was working down here when... A sudden shift of wind through the tunnel interrupted him. Something cold and damp brushed Lauren's cheek. The flame from her portable lantern flickered blue for a heartbeat, then steadied. She swallowed hard. He must have sheltered here before the accident. Maybe he tried to reach the ridge for help and didn't make it. Nate looked around the chamber. Then why did the cat bring the bag to the hospital instead of here? Lauren's voice was quiet. Because it knew humans would come for her. Not him. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the weight of that truth pressing between them. Then, faint and distant, came a cry from the baby, muffled by the cave walls, but sharp enough to make Lauren turn back toward the entrance. We should go, she said. We need to move them to the ridge before the storm starts again. Nate nodded, pocketing the ID badge. I'll grab what's left of the radio and see if it still works. When they returned to the main cavern, Clara had fed the fire higher. The mother was still unconscious, but stable. The baby stirred in her arms, small hands clenching the blanket. Lauren knelt beside the bobcat, who had settled again near the flames. Its fur steamed faintly in the heat, and its eyes seemed calmer now, almost serene. You brought us to him, she said quietly. Didn't you? The animal didn't move, but its tail brushed the stone once, slow and deliberate. Nate set the radio near the fire, tinkering with the dials until static filled the cave. Signal's weak, he muttered, but if we can reach dispatch from the ridge, we'll have a chance. Lauren nodded. Then we head out at first light. The hours passed in uneasy stillness. Every so often, snow shifted outside, sending faint cracks echoing through the stone. Lauren didn't sleep. She couldn't. Her mind kept circling the same image. Aaron Cole, somewhere in these woods, bleeding, freezing, but trusting that the creature he'd once saved would carry his final message. Just before dawn, the wind began to ease. The faintest gray light filtered through the cracks in the snow wall. Nate stirred from his half-doze. It's time, he said. Lauren rose, stretching her stiff limbs. Clara bundled the baby tighter. They checked the mother one last time. Still alive, still fighting. Lauren turned toward the bobcat. You coming? The animal blinked slowly, then stood. Its limp was worse now, but it stepped forward anyway, tail low, steady. Guess that's a yes, Nate said quietly. They packed their things, doused the fire, and pushed through the drifted snow at the entrance. The world outside was ghostly, gray sky, glittering frost, the storm finally broken. In the distance, through the thin veil of mist, the first streaks of sunlight touched the ridge. Lauren squinted into the light. That's the direction of the research post. Nate adjusted his pack. Then let's get there before the mountain changes its mind. As they began their climb, the bobcat took the lead again, limping but resolute. Its tracks cut a clean line through the snow, leading them higher into the forest. Halfway up, Lauren paused and looked back. The valley below lay quiet and endless, the truck barely visible under a blanket of white. For the first time since the hospital doors had opened the night before, she felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, not exhaustion, but hope. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself. "Hang on, Aaron. We're getting them home." The bobcat turned its head, as if hearing her, and let out a soft, guttural sound that echoed across the ridge. Then it kept walking, into the pale light of morning. And somewhere deep inside her, Lauren understood that the creature wasn't just guiding them to safety, it was guiding them toward the truth. The forest glowed faintly in the dawn light, a pale silver cast over the snow-covered branches. Every sound was hushed. The crunch of boots, the soft pant of the bobcat ahead of them, the steady breathing of the infant bundled close against Clara's chest. The storm had broken, but the cold remained, heavy and biting, as if the mountain wasn't ready to release them yet. They moved carefully through the thinning trees, the snow shallower now, but crusted with ice. The bobcat led steadily, stopping every few yards to glance back, making sure they were still following. Its limp had worsened overnight, but it didn't slow. It seemed driven by something stronger than instinct, an unspoken promise it meant to keep. Lauren trudged behind, carrying the black bag over her shoulder, her breath clouding in the air. The mother, wrapped in thermal blankets, lay secured to the makeshift sled Nate had rigged with climbing rope and 2 sturdy branches. They dragged her gently across the snow, stopping every so often to check her pulse and adjust the wrappings. "How's she holding up?" Nate asked over his shoulder. "Barely," Lauren replied, voice hoarse. "But she's still with us." The bobcat paused near a ridge, its ears twitching. The forest had grown eerily quiet, the kind of silence that felt alive. Lauren caught up to it and crouched beside the animal, scanning the slope ahead. "What is it?" she whispered, though she knew she wouldn't get an answer. The cat's gaze was fixed on a shadowed clearing below. Following its line of sight, Lauren saw it. A collapsed pickup truck half buried in the snow, its frame twisted, one headlight still faintly glowing beneath a crust of ice. Her stomach dropped. "That's Aaron's truck," she breathed. Nate joined her, his face grim. "So this is where it happened." Clara looked down from behind them, clutching the baby tighter. "Do you think he's still down there?" Lauren didn't answer. She adjusted her gloves and started down the slope. "We're about to find out." The snow crunched beneath her boots as she descended, careful not to slip on the ice. The bobcat followed close beside her, low to the ground, its breath puffing small clouds into the air. When they reached the wreck, the full scene came into view: a shattered windshield, a door torn open, and a dark smear of dried blood across the snow. Lauren crouched beside the cab and brushed the frost away from the driver's seat. "He must have lost control in the storm," she said quietly. "Slid right off the ridge." Nate examined the tracks leading away from the crash site. "Looks like he made it out. See here?" He pointed to a series of boot prints, faint but visible, leading into the trees. "He was alive when the truck went down." Lauren followed the trail with her flashlight. The prints zigzagged through the snow, stopping a few yards ahead where they were joined by another set, smaller, rounder. "Bobcat tracks," she said softly. "It found him." Clara's voice trembled. "So he didn't die here?" Lauren shook her head. "No, he was still fighting." She scanned the wreck again and spotted something half buried beneath the snow, a leather-bound notebook, its edges stiff with ice. She pulled it free and wiped it clean. Across the cover, stamped in faded gold lettering, were the initials AC. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were notes, observations about animal behavior, weather conditions, and field data. But the last entry stopped her cold. December 14th. Weather worsening. Lost communication. Maria injured. Shelter in cave near creek bed. Leaving supplies with Luna. She'll know what to do. Lauren read the words aloud. Clara covered her mouth. He named the bobcat? Luna, Lauren repeated softly, looking at the animal. The cat turned its head toward her as if recognizing its name, eyes gleaming with faint light. Nate straightened. He must have trusted it completely, sent it for help when he couldn't go himself. Lauren's throat tightened. And it did exactly that. They searched the surrounding area, but there was no sign of Aaron. Only his tracks leading uphill toward the ridge before fading into the forest. A faint glimmer of torn fabric hung from a nearby branch, dark blue, like the jacket he was known to wear. Lauren ran her thumb over the frayed edge. He tried to make it to the main road, she murmured. He didn't stop fighting. Nate glanced toward the tree line. We should keep moving. The ridge post isn't far from here. Maybe half a mile. Clara nodded, shifting the baby gently. She's warming up a little. That's a good sign. Lauren placed the notebook carefully inside her coat. Then let's finish what he started. They pulled the sled free of the snow and began their slow climb toward the ridge. The bobcat led again, tail low, its gait deliberate but unwavering. The forest seemed to open before it, as if the mountain itself were guiding their path. As they ascended, the landscape changed. Taller pines, rockier ground, and the faint glint of ice forming along the trunks. The sun broke through the clouds in slivers, painting the snow in shades of silver and gold. It was beautiful, but hauntingly still. At the top of the ridge, they finally saw it. The research post. A small structure of weathered wood and corrugated steel, half hidden beneath snowdrifts, its antenna bent and rusted. There, Nate said, pointing. If we're lucky, that generator's still alive. Lauren's legs burned as they trudged the final stretch. The bobcat reached the door first, sniffing around before sitting down beside it, tail curling over its paws. Nate forced the door open with a shove, the hinges groaning. Inside, the air was stale and cold, but dry. Old papers, overturned chairs, and a scattering of animal cages filled the space. The faint smell of gasoline lingered, fuel for the generator, untouched. Lauren flipped the power switch, and to her astonishment, the overhead lights flickered, then steadied with a low hum. Clara let out a breath. It still works. Nate checked the radio set on the desk. Signal's weak, but it's alive. I can reach dispatch. As he tuned the frequency, Lauren knelt to check the mother's vitals again. The color in her face had improved slightly under the steady warmth of the room. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry that echoed in the stillness. Good girl, Lauren whispered. Keep fighting. The bobcat settled near the wall, eyes half closed, exhausted but alert. It looked smaller in the light, thinner than before, every breath a quiet struggle. Lauren felt a pang of guilt and gratitude so sharp it hurt. Nate's voice broke through the silence. I've got them. Dispatch, this is Ranger Graham out of Silver Pine Ridge. We have 2 survivors, female adult and infant, critical condition. Request immediate rescue by snow unit. The static hissed. Then a voice replied, crackling but clear enough. Copy that, Ranger Graham. Team en route from Silver Pine Medical, ETA 40 minutes. Hold position. Lauren closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. We made it. But Nate's expression stayed cautious. 40 minutes is a long time up here. We'll need to keep them stable till then. Clara nodded, adjusting the blanket around the baby. I can handle her. You focus on the mother. Lauren moved to the workbench, searching for anything useful. Antiseptic, gauze, spare gloves. She found a small medical kit and began treating the woman's leg wound again, her hands steady despite the fatigue clawing at her body. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The faint whistle seeped through cracks in the walls, low and mournful. The bobcat lifted its head suddenly, ears swiveling toward the sound. It gave a short growl, deep and warning. Lauren froze. "What is it?" Nate peered through the window slit. "Hard to tell, probably just the wind." But the animal didn't relax. It rose slowly, tail flicking, muscles coiled tight. Clara swallowed. "Do you think it's sensing something?" Lauren glanced at the door. "Maybe. Animals always know first." The next few minutes stretched long and tense. The fire Nate had built in the old stove crackled softly. The mother's breathing evened out. The baby's tiny hand curled around Clara's finger. For a fleeting instant, the world felt still again. Then, outside, something snapped. A sharp crack, like a branch breaking, or a footstep in the snow. Nate grabbed his flashlight and opened the door, the cold rushing in like a wave. He scanned the clearing. Nothing. Only wind sweeping across the ridge. Lauren joined him, squinting into the glare. "You see anything?" He shook his head. "No. But that sound—" Before he could finish, a soft whimper came from behind them. The mother had woken. Her voice was a rasp, weak but certain. "He's out there." Lauren turned back, kneeling beside her. "Aaron?" The woman nodded faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "He never made it home." Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying with it a faint sound, like a whisper or a cry echoing through the trees. It was distant, but real. The bobcat stepped forward to the doorway, eyes locked on the forest beyond. It let out a low, drawn-out call that reverberated across the ridge, a call of recognition, of grief, of something deeper than language. Lauren's breath caught. She didn't know what waited beyond those trees, but she knew the animal did. And as the echo of that haunting cry faded into the morning light, she realized their journey wasn't over yet. Not until they found what, or who, the bobcat was still searching for. The radio crackled behind them, a soft hum of static filling the cabin. Nate adjusted the dial, trying to keep the connection alive, but the wind's moan outside made every sound uncertain. The snow had stopped, but the mountain was still alive, groaning, shifting, breathing like some ancient beast. Lauren sat beside the mother, whose eyes fluttered open again. The color had started to return to her cheeks. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she whispered. Lauren nodded. "Yes. The cat. It knows something. Maybe where your husband is." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Aaron, he wouldn't leave us. He promised." "I know," Lauren said softly, her voice catching. "And I think he's still out there, one way or another." The baby stirred in Clara's arms, her small chest rising and falling unevenly. A weak cry escaped her lips, barely more than a breath. Clara frowned. "She's cold again. Her breathing's shallow." Lauren's instincts took over instantly. "Lay her down. Let me check." Clara spread out a clean cloth on the table, unwrapping the baby from the blanket. Her tiny skin was pale, almost bluish around the lips. The pulse beneath her ribs fluttered weakly, like a candle about to go out. Lauren pressed her stethoscope against the infant's chest, her own breath hitching as she listened. "She's in cardiac distress," she murmured. "Probably from hypothermia. We need warmth, fast." Nate reached for the emergency heater, but the flames sputtered. "Fuel's almost gone." "Then body heat," Lauren said firmly. "Clara, skin-to-skin contact. Now." Clara didn't hesitate. She opened her coat and held the baby close against her chest, wrapping both in the thermal blanket. The child let out a tiny gasp, then went frighteningly still. Lauren, Clara whispered, voice breaking. She's not breathing. The room seemed to freeze. For a moment, there was no sound, no wind, no fire, nothing but the thud of Lauren's heartbeat in her ears. Then she was moving, already clearing the table. Lay her down. Clara's hands shook as she set the baby down. Lauren pressed 2 fingers to the infant's chest, counting under her breath. No pulse. She began compressions, tiny, precise movements, her gloved fingers pushing rhythmically against the baby's chest. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Clara covered the child's mouth and nose, giving 2 small breaths. The baby's chest lifted faintly, then fell. Come on, Lauren whispered. Don't you give up on me. Nate stood frozen by the door, his knuckles white against the frame. Even the bobcat seemed to sense the tension. It rose slowly from its corner, limping closer, watching with wide, unblinking eyes. Lauren kept going. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Over and over, her arms trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Stay with me, she pleaded. Stay. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Clara was crying openly now, clutching the edge of the table. Lauren, it's been too long. Not yet, Lauren snapped, her voice breaking. Not while she's still warm. The bobcat made a low, throaty sound from the floor, a deep rumble that vibrated through the cabin. It wasn't aggression. It was something else, something ancient. It stepped closer, resting one paw on the table's edge, its head lowered beside the baby's, and for a heartbeat, it looked as though the animal were praying. Lauren froze, tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, she whispered, not sure if she was talking to the baby, the cat, or something far greater. Then, faintly, so faintly she almost missed it, a sound. A whimper. The baby's chest rose once, then again. A tiny cry broke the silence, thin but unmistakable. Clara let out a sob that turned into laughter. She's breathing. Lauren, she's breathing. Lauren sat back, hands shaking, tears streaming freely now. Good girl, she whispered, voice trembling. You fight. You hear me? You fight. The bobcat stepped back, its golden eyes soft in the flickering light. It gave a quiet, rasping chuff, a sound Lauren had never heard before, half growl, half purr, filled with something that felt like relief. Clara cradled the baby again, wrapping her gently in the blanket. Her heart's steady now, she said through tears. She's coming back. Lauren wiped her eyes with the back of her glove, forcing herself to breathe. Keep her close. Keep her warm. Nate turned away, blinking hard, pretending to check the radio. Rescue team's 30 minutes out, he said, voice thick. They'll be here soon. Lauren nodded, her body trembling from exhaustion. Good. Let's hold on till then. She turned to the mother, who was half awake now, watching them with dazed eyes. You have a strong little girl, Lauren said gently. She's not giving up. The woman tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. Aaron. He'd be proud. Lauren squeezed her hand. We'll find him, I promise. The woman's eyes fluttered shut again, her breathing slow but steady. Outside, the wind began to shift, growing softer, carrying the first hints of melting snow. Morning light filtered through the broken window, painting the room in muted gold. It should have felt warm, but Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something waiting. The bobcat paced near the doorway, ears twitching. It turned its head toward the woods, its body tense. What is it now? Nate asked quietly. Lauren followed its gaze. Through the trees beyond the clearing, the snow reflected flashes of movement, shadows that came and went between the trunks. It could have been the wind, or it could have been something else. The animal let out another low growl, protective this time, standing between the humans and whatever waited outside. Nate stepped closer to the door, flashlight in hand. "I'll check." Lauren caught his arm. "No, stay here." But before she could stop him, Nate pushed the door open, snow crunching under his boots as he stepped into the clearing. His flashlight beam cut through the pale light, sweeping across the ridge. "Anything?" Lauren called. He shook his head. "Nothing but—" "Wait." He knelt, brushing snow aside. "Tracks. Human." Lauren's heart skipped. "Aaron's?" "Could be," Nate said. "They're old, but they lead toward the creek." Lauren looked down at the bobcat, whose ears had flattened. Its tail flicked once before it limped forward past Nate, following the prints. It stopped a few yards ahead and looked back as if waiting. Clara looked up from where she sat with the baby. "Lauren, you're not going out there again, are you?" Lauren hesitated, torn. The rational part of her screamed to stay. Wait for rescue. Don't risk more lives. But the part of her that had watched that animal drag a blood-soaked bag through a hospital door couldn't ignore what it was asking now. "I'll be quick," she said. "If he's out there, we owe it to him." Nate sighed, knowing there was no changing her mind. "Fine. But I'm coming with you." They set out together, moving carefully through the snow. The prints were faint, leading downhill toward the frozen creek bed. The trees stood silent around them, their branches heavy with frost. After 10 minutes, they saw it. A dark shape half buried near the water's edge. Lauren's stomach twisted. "Oh no!" They hurried forward. It was a man. His body curled, one arm outstretched toward the ice. His jacket was torn, his skin pale as the snow around him. Nate knelt, brushing the frost from his face. "It's him," he said softly. "Aaron Cole." Lauren's knees gave out. She sank beside him, pressing trembling fingers to his neck. There was nothing. Cold. Still. But then the faintest twitch. A shiver. "Nate!" she gasped. "He's alive!" They worked fast. Nate tore open a heat pack and pressed it to the man's chest. Lauren checked his airway, tilting his head back gently. His lips were blue, his breathing shallow but present. "He's in severe hypothermia," she said, her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "We have to get him to the post." Nate nodded, already lifting. "Come on, Doc. Let's bring him home." The bobcat watched silently as they carried Aaron back up the slope. Its breath came in shallow bursts, its body trembling with exhaustion. But it followed anyway, step for step, until they reached the cabin once more. When the door opened and Lauren stepped inside carrying Aaron's limp form, Clara gasped. "He's alive?" "Barely," Lauren said. "But yes, he's alive." They laid him beside his wife. The moment her hand brushed his, her pulse quickened. Even unconscious, she seemed to sense him. Lauren looked down at them, the family, reunited, even on the edge of death, and felt tears blur her vision. "Stay with me," she whispered. "All of you." Outside, the faint wail of a siren rose in the distance, the rescue team climbing the ridge. The bobcat, lying near the fire now, exhaled softly. Its body relaxed for the first time since the night began. Lauren crouched beside it, brushing a hand over its matted fur. "You did it," she murmured. "You kept your promise." The cat blinked once, slow and tired. Its breathing was weak but steady, and as the sirens grew louder, echoing through the mountains, Lauren realized she was witnessing something far greater than survival. She was witnessing faith. Faith written not in words but in instinct, sacrifice and love strong enough to cross the boundary between the wild and the human. The sound of the rescue chopper was faint at first, carried on the wind like a ghost, but growing clearer by the second Its rhythmic thrum reverberated off the snow-covered slopes, blending with the distant cries of ravens startled from their perches. The cabin trembled slightly, its windows rattling in their frames. Nate stepped outside, waving his orange signal cloth into the cold air. "Over here!" he shouted. His voice was nearly swallowed by the gusts, but the helicopter tilted in acknowledgement, beginning its descent. Inside, the tiny room was a fragile sanctuary of warmth and exhaustion. Clara cradled the baby against her chest, rocking slowly, her eyes glassy with relief. The child slept peacefully now, her small hand clutching a fold of Clara's sleeve. Aaron lay beside his wife on the narrow cot. His skin, once deathly pale, had regained a faint flush of color. Lauren sat between them, watching the rise and fall of their breathing, the miracle she had barely dared to hope for. The bobcat lay near the dying fire, motionless except for the faint twitch of its tail. Its breathing was shallow, uneven. Lauren moved closer, kneeling beside it. "Hey," she whispered, "stay with me. Just a little longer." The animal blinked slowly, its golden eyes reflecting the soft light. It made a weak sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, a sound that felt like gratitude. Lauren's throat tightened. "You've done your part. You brought them home." The door burst open, and 2 rescue medics stepped in, snow swirling around them. "Dr. Hayes?" one of them called out. "Yes," Lauren said, rising. "They're both hypothermic but stable for now. The baby's responsive." She hesitated, glancing toward the bobcat. "And there's one more." The medic followed her gaze and froze. "You've got to be kidding. That's a wildcat." Lauren shook her head firmly. "Not to me. Not anymore." They moved quickly, setting up stretchers, wrapping the family in thermal blankets, checking vitals. The radio crackled as Nate coordinated with the pilot outside. The air inside the cabin filled with the sharp scent of disinfectant and diesel from the chopper. Clara handed the baby to one of the medics, her hands trembling with relief. "Take care of her, please." "We will," the medic promised. Lauren leaned over Aaron, gently brushing snow from his hair. His eyelids fluttered open for a moment, unfocused but aware. His voice was barely audible. "You found them?" "We did," Lauren said softly. "Thanks to Luna." His eyes drifted toward the bobcat. For a heartbeat, something like recognition crossed his face, a flicker of connection, of memory. Then his hand went still in hers. "Keep him warm," Lauren ordered sharply. The medics worked fast, wrapping him tighter, checking his pulse, nodding at each other. "He's stable enough to move. We'll get him to the hospital." Lauren turned back to the bobcat. Its breathing had grown fainter, each exhale shallower than the last. She pressed a gloved hand against its side, feeling the fragile rhythm beneath her fingers. "You hear that?" she whispered. "They're safe now. You did it." The animal's eyes half closed. It let out a long, slow breath that sounded almost like a sigh. Lauren's own breath trembled. "You're going home too, okay?" But deep down she knew it wasn't that simple. The medics carried the family to the chopper one by one, their bodies swaddled in blankets, their faces pale but peaceful. The baby let out a soft cry as the cold air touched her cheeks, and Clara smiled through tears. Lauren stood in the doorway, watching until the last stretcher disappeared into the whir of blades. Then she turned back toward the cabin. Only the bobcat remained. She knelt beside it, brushing a hand gently through its matted fur. The silence around them felt sacred. Outside, the wind had quieted. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. Nate appeared in the doorway, snow crusted on his coat. "They're ready to lift off," he said softly. "I'll stay with her a little longer," Lauren replied. He hesitated, then nodded. "You sure?" She gave a small smile. "Yeah," She deserves that. Nate stepped outside, leaving the door open just enough for the morning light to spill in. Lauren sat beside the dying fire, the heat barely enough to warm her hands. The bobcat's eyes flicked open one last time, meeting hers. There was no fear in them, only peace. "You kept your promise," Lauren said quietly. "You saved her family." The animal blinked once, slow and deliberate. Then its chest rose and fell and did not rise again. Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She reached out, resting her palm over its still heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the chopper lifted off, sending ripples of snow cascading across the ridge. The sound faded quickly, swallowed by the mountains. For a long moment, Lauren stayed there, alone with the silence. Then she stood, pulling the blanket from her shoulders and draping it gently over the bobcat's body. When she stepped outside, Nate was waiting near the path, his face drawn but calm. "They're on their way," he said. "Pilot says they'll make it to Silverpine in 20 minutes. Lauren nodded, glancing back at the cabin. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, rising into the pale sky like a prayer. "You coming?" Nate asked. "In a minute." She took one last look at the ridge, the endless stretch of snow, the faint outline of the trail they'd followed, and the frozen quiet that seemed to hum with unseen life. She felt the ache of loss, but also something else, a quiet certainty that what had happened here would never really end. As they started down the mountain, the wind picked up again, gentler this time. Somewhere in the distance, a sound carried through the trees, a soft, familiar chuff. Lauren froze. Nate turned. "Did you hear that?" She smiled faintly, tears shining in her eyes. "Yeah," she whispered. "I did." When they reached the base of the ridge, the rescue team loaded them into the convoy that would take them back to town. The roads were clearer now, glistening under the weak afternoon sun. The forest receded behind them, its secrets buried once more beneath the snow. Lauren looked out the window as they drove, the black bag resting on her lap. Its once slick leather was now worn and cracked, but she held it like something sacred. Inside were the things that had bound this strange chain of lives together. Aaron's note, the vial of insulin, the blood-stained cloth, the symbols of love, fear, and survival. When they reached Silverpine Medical Center, familiar faces met them at the doors. Doctors, nurses, even Jake the security guard. They all froze when they saw what Lauren carried in her arms. "Is that—" someone began. Lauren nodded, voice steady but heavy. "She led us home." They rushed the family inside. Lauren followed for a moment, watching as the emergency team took over. Machines beeped, hands moved quickly, and life continued its fragile, miraculous fight. When she stepped back outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the snow a deep orange. She stood there for a long time, letting the quiet sink in. Nate came up beside her. "You should get some rest." "I will," she said. "After this." She turned toward the distant line of pines, the same ridge where it had all begun. For a brief second, she imagined she saw movement, a flicker of tawny fur disappearing between the trees. She smiled, not in sadness, but in awe. "Goodbye, Luna," she whispered. "You did it." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and something else. Warmth, faint but undeniable, like the echo of life that refused to fade. Lauren stood there until the last light disappeared behind the mountains. Then she turned back toward the hospital, where the faint cries of a newborn rose from within, fragile but strong. And for the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that everything, every pain, every loss, every impossible moment, had led exactly where it was meant to. Home. For several hours after their return, Silver Pine Medical Center felt like a sanctuary under glass, quiet, bright, and heavy with relief. Snow continued to drift against the tall glass doors, but inside, warmth and purpose filled the air. Doctors moved swiftly but calmly. Nurses exchanged soft, exhausted smiles. Somewhere down the hall, a baby's faint cry echoed, the sound delicate but strong enough to soften even the coldest night. Lauren stood by the window of the recovery room, her reflection ghosted against the snow beyond. Behind her, the young mother slept, her breathing even, her baby tucked in a bassinet nearby under the soft blue light of the warmer. Machines beeped in gentle rhythm, a fragile symphony of survival. "You should go home, Dr. Hayes," a nurse said kindly. "You've been here since dawn." Lauren managed a small smile. "Soon. I just want to check on them one more time." The nurse nodded and slipped out quietly, leaving the room in a hush that felt sacred. Lauren turned back to the window. She could still see the faint glow of the mountains in the distance, the ridge where it all began. The thought brought both peace and pain. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small silver tag she'd found tangled in the bobcat's fur before they left the cabin. It was old, scratched, but the engraving was still legible. A.C. Aaron Cole. Her thumb traced the letters slowly. "You taught her well," she whispered. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Nate stepped into the room, still in his ranger's jacket, his face windburned but calm. "They're both stable," he said, nodding toward the sleeping figures. "Vitals are strong. Looks like they'll make it." Lauren exhaled a shaky breath. "Good." She turned back toward the window, her voice softer. "Did they take Luna?" Nate hesitated. "Yeah. She didn't make it through the night." Lauren closed her eyes, letting the words settle like ash. "They found her where you left her," Nate continued gently. "We brought her back. I thought you'd want to see her before the wildlife team takes her to the preserve." Lauren nodded, her throat tight. "Where is she now?" "The rescue bay," Nate said. "They're waiting for your okay." She gave a quiet nod and followed him out of the room. The hallway lights hummed softly overhead, washing everything in pale gold. As they walked, Lauren felt the exhaustion finally catching up to her. The weight of every mile, every impossible choice. Yet beneath it all was a pulse of gratitude, deep and steady. When they reached the lower level, the scent of antiseptic and pine cleaner filled the air. A single examination table stood near the back, draped in a white sheet. Lauren stopped just inside the doorway. The bobcat lay still beneath the thin fabric, its form smaller than she remembered. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It carried something invisible but palpable, like the lingering echo of a prayer. Nate stood beside her, silent. Lauren stepped forward and gently lifted the edge of the sheet. Luna's fur glimmered faintly under the fluorescent light. Tawny gold, streaked with faint silver, dusted with remnants of snow. Her body was still, but her face was serene, her eyes closed as if in sleep. Lauren swallowed hard. "She looks peaceful." "She earned that," Nate said softly. Lauren laid a hand on the animal's shoulder, the fur soft beneath her palm. She never once hesitated, even when she was hurt. Nate nodded. "That's the wild for you. They don't quit. Not for themselves. Not for the ones they love." Lauren's voice trembled. "She wasn't just wild, Nate. She was more than that. It's like she knew what had to be done." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rhythmic hum of the heating vents filled the silence. Then, Lauren reached into her coat again and pulled out the black bag, the same one that had changed everything. She unzipped it slowly, her hands steady now. Inside were the remnants of their ordeal. The insulin vial, the empty syringe wrapper, the folded note stained with blood. She read the words one last time. Help her. Mother in the woods. Follow the cat. Her throat tightened as she folded it back carefully. He trusted her with his last message, she whispered, and she never failed him. Nate rested a hand on her shoulder. You think animals like her understand that kind of trust? Lauren smiled faintly. I think they understand more than we do. She placed the note back inside the bag and zipped it closed. She deserves to rest near him, she said. They should be together. Nate nodded. I can make that happen. The Forest Service can take her to the ridge site. We'll make sure it's done right. Lauren's eyes glistened. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment longer. Then Lauren leaned down and whispered, Goodbye, Luna. You brought them home. Now it's your turn. She replaced the sheet, smoothing it gently. When they left the room, Nate paused by the door. You know, he said, some folks around here are already calling her the miracle cat of Silver Pine. Lauren let out a soft laugh, half sad, half proud. She'd hate that, she said. She wasn't looking for attention. She just did what needed to be done. Nate smiled. Guess that's what makes it a miracle. They walked back toward the main floor. Through the glass wall, Lauren could see the mother awake now, holding her baby close, tears glinting in her eyes as she whispered something to the tiny bundle in her arms. Lauren stopped to watch. The woman looked up, meeting her gaze through the glass. She mouthed the words, Thank you. Lauren pressed her hand against the glass and smiled. Don't thank me, she whispered. Thank her. The woman nodded, understanding. That night, long after the hospital had gone, quiet, Lauren stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky vast and clear. The snow reflected the moonlight like 1,000 tiny mirrors. She walked to the edge of the parking lot, where the pines began again, their shadows stretching long across the snow. She closed her eyes and listened. No sirens, no wind. Only the faint, familiar hum of the mountain itself. The same heartbeat she'd felt in that cabin. The same rhythm that had carried her through the storm. Somewhere far off, an owl called, its voice echoing down the valley. And for a fleeting second, she thought she heard something else too, a soft chuff carried by the wind. She smiled. The next morning, before the wildlife team departed for the ridge, Lauren joined them. She carried the black bag in her arms, the one that had started it all. They loaded Luna's body gently into the back of the truck, wrapped in a white blanket. As the engine started, Lauren looked toward the forest one last time. Sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the trail that wound up into the mountains. It was brighter now, warmer somehow. She's going home, Nate said beside her. Lauren nodded. So are they all. They stood there until the truck disappeared down the road. Back inside the hospital, the morning light spilled through the tall windows, painting everything gold. The mother and baby slept peacefully, safe at last. The sound of monitors ticking softly filled the room, a steady, gentle reminder that life had prevailed. Lauren walked past their door and paused. For a moment, she thought of the bobcat again, the fierce, loyal creature that had bridged two worlds with nothing but faith and determination. She whispered, almost to herself, Rest easy, wild one. The world's a little brighter because of you. And as she turned to leave, the first rays of dawn crept across the floor, warm and alive, catching the edge of her name tag, Dr. Lauren Hayes, and reflecting it like a spark of light returning home. The wild had breathed its last, but its echo remained. It always would. 2 days passed before the hospital began to feel normal again. The snow had stopped falling, the roads had reopened, and the rhythm of daily life cautiously crept back into Silverpine. But for those who had witnessed what happened, something unspoken lingered in the air, a hush that carried both awe and grief. Dr. Lauren Hayes moved through the quiet halls like a shadow, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. Every time she passed the recovery room, she found herself slowing down. Inside, the young mother, Emma Cole, was growing stronger each day. The baby, now stable, slept in her arms more often than in the bassinet. Nurses whispered that the two were miracles. Lauren knew that wasn't far from the truth. It was a slow afternoon when Nurse Clara found her in the staff lounge. The coffee had gone cold in Lauren's hands. Clara's expression told her something was off. "Lauren," she said softly, "you might want to see this." Lauren straightened immediately. "What happened?" "It's nothing bad," Clara said quickly, lowering her voice. "We were cleaning Emma's bandages, her left arm near the shoulder, and we found something underneath the dressing, something taped to her skin." Lauren frowned, setting her mug aside. "Taped?" Clara nodded. "Yeah, folded paper. Looked like it had been there for days, sealed under the gauze. We almost missed it." A strange chill swept through Lauren as she followed Clara down the hall. When they reached the recovery room, Emma was awake, the baby nestled beside her. A faint smile crossed the woman's lips when she saw Lauren enter. "Dr. Hayes," she whispered, "you're still here." "I'm not leaving until you and your little one are completely out of danger," Lauren replied gently. Clara handed her a small, crumpled note sealed in clear medical tape. "We thought you should open it." Lauren carefully peeled the plastic away and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, familiar. "If I don't make it, send her home. The cat knows the way. AC." Lauren felt her heart tighten. The letters were faint, the ink smeared by blood and water, but the meaning was clear. She looked up at Emma, who had tears glistening in her eyes. "It was Aaron," Emma whispered, voice trembling. "He must have written that before everything." Lauren nodded, her voice barely steady. "He trusted her, even then." Emma looked down at her baby, then back at Lauren. "He always said she was special. That Bobcat. He rescued her from a trap last spring, spent weeks nursing her back to health. She never left our clearing after that." Her fingers tightened around the blanket. "He called her Luna, said she wasn't wild anymore, just free." Lauren smiled softly, the name echoing like a heartbeat. "Luna." Emma wiped her eyes. "When the truck went off the road, he pushed me over the seat with the baby. He said he'd get help. I begged him not to go, but he just said, 'She'll find you.' I didn't understand until I saw her there." Her voice broke, dragging that bag through the snow. Lauren's throat closed. She wanted to speak, to comfort, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached for Emma's hand. "He kept his promise, and so did she." They sat in silence for a long moment, the baby's soft breathing the only sound between them. Then, as Lauren stood to leave, Emma said quietly, "Dr. Hayes, I want you to keep that note. Please." Lauren blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes. You believed her when no one else would. That's why we're alive. It belongs with you now." Lauren hesitated, then folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said softly. As she stepped out into the hallway, the air felt heavier, filled with the weight of everything that had been lost and everything that had been saved. Nate was waiting near the nurse's station, his hat in his hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said gently. Something like that, she murmured. They found a letter under her bandage from Aaron. Nate's brow furrowed. What did it say? That Luna knew the way home. Nate nodded slowly, almost reverently. Then I guess he was right. They walked together down the corridor toward the small observation window that overlooked the parking lot. Outside, the world was bright and clean. Snow sparkled under the afternoon sun. Workers were clearing branches near the fence, and for the first time in days, Silverpine didn't feel haunted. It felt reborn. You know, Nate said after a pause, when we brought Luna's body back from the ridge, the vet who checked her said something strange. Lauren glanced over. What kind of strange? She found scarring on the animal's leg, healed clean. Said it matched a rescue record from 6 months ago, a wildlife rehab tag with Aaron Cole's signature. Nate tilted his head. That cat really did belong to him. Maybe she wasn't just following orders. Maybe she was coming home. Lauren looked down at her hands. She never stopped keeping her promise. Nate nodded. Neither did you. A faint smile touched her lips. I just followed her lead. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the pines, Lauren made her way to the small courtyard behind the hospital. The snow there was untouched, a smooth, glistening field that caught the fading light like a mirror. In the center, a small temporary marker stood, a stone with a plaque that read, Luna. She led them home. Someone from the staff had placed a few pine branches around it. A child's mitten rested nearby, likely dropped by one of the nurse's kids. Lauren knelt beside the stone and laid the black bag next to it. I don't think you ever wanted this back, she said softly, but it feels right that it stays with you. The wind rustled through the calm, trees, gentle and warm despite the chill. For a moment, it sounded like the whisper of breath. A soft chuff carried through the air. Lauren smiled faintly, blinking against the sting of tears. I hear you, she whispered. You can rest now. When she stood, Nate was watching from the edge of the courtyard. You always talk to your patients like that? He teased gently. Only the ones who never stop surprising me, she replied, her voice steady but soft. He smiled, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. I talked to the wildlife center. They're going to place a memorial plaque in the preserve where Aaron worked. His wife wanted that. She deserves to see it, Lauren said. They both do. I'll take her up there when she's ready, Nate promised. They stood quietly as the last rays of sunlight spilled through the trees. The snow around the marker shimmered like gold. Later that night, Lauren sat alone in her office, the hospital lights dimmed. She unfolded Aaron's note one last time, tracing each line with her finger. Send her home. The cat knows the way. The words seemed to glow faintly under the desk lamp, and for the first time since the storm began, Lauren felt something inside her settle, a stillness that wasn't emptiness, but peace. She folded the letter again and slipped it into her journal, pressing it flat between the pages. Then she leaned back, closing her eyes. Outside, snow began to fall once more, light, calm, and quiet. Through the frosted glass, the faint outline of the forest stretched into the distance, dark and endless. And somewhere out there, among the shadows and pine needles, she imagined a sound, the steady rhythm of footsteps through the snow, fading into the trees. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was faith. Either way, she knew she'd never forget the lesson that wild creature had left behind. Love doesn't need to be tamed to be true. It only needs a path home. A week later, the snow had started to melt along the lower ridge. Thin rivulets of water trickled down the mountain roads, glinting under the late morning sun. The forest that had once howled with storm winds was now breathing again. Soft, alive, forgiving. Dr. Lauren Hayes drove slowly along the narrow trail that wound through the Silver Pine Reserve, the same road where they had first followed Luna into the storm. The black bag rested in the passenger seat beside her, its leather cleaned but scarred, like a relic from another world. The folded note from Aaron Cole was tucked inside her coat pocket. The hospital had finally returned to normal, but Lauren hadn't. Not yet. The silence of the woods had been calling her back, like unfinished business. When she reached the clearing at the top of the ridge, Nate was already there, his ranger truck parked beside the trail. He stood by the edge of the pines, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the crisp air. "Took you long enough," he said, with a faint smile as she stepped out of the car. "Had to stop by the hospital," she replied, closing the door. "Emma's strong enough to walk again. She said she'll visit the site once the snow's gone." Nate nodded, glancing toward the tree line. "I think she'll want to see this." They carried the small wooden box between them, Luna's resting place. The Wildlife Service had prepared it carefully, wrapped in cloth made from natural fibers, the kind that would return to the earth. Lauren had requested it that way. "Right up here," Nate said, leading her along a narrow footpath. The pines whispered overhead, their needles shedding the last of the snow. When they reached the crest of the ridge, the world opened before them. Rolling slopes, streams glittering below, and the endless sea of trees stretching into the horizon. The sun hung low, painting everything in muted gold. Lauren set the box down on a flat patch of earth beside an old cedar stump. The air was cool and still, the kind of silence that invited prayer without words. "This was her home," Nate said quietly. "The place she came back to." Lauren nodded. "Then it's where she should stay." She knelt, brushing away a thin layer of frost from the ground. Her hands moved slowly, reverently. Nate joined her, working beside her until the soil gave way. When the hole was ready, Lauren unwrapped the cloth. Luna's fur glowed faintly under the sunlight, golden, soft, untouched by decay. For a moment, she couldn't move. It felt wrong to let go. Nate noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to do this alone," he said gently. "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. It feels like saying goodbye to a part of something bigger than me." Nate nodded. "Maybe it is, but maybe that's the point." Lauren took a slow breath and lowered the small bundle into the earth. "You can rest now," she murmured. "You found them. You found home." As she covered the box with soil, the sound of the wind changed, a low, sweeping sigh through the pines. A single feather drifted down from above, landing on the fresh earth. Lauren froze, staring at it. It was soft, white, perfectly clean. Nate exhaled. "Guess nature's saying her piece." Lauren smiled faintly. "She always does." They stood there for a long while in silence. Then Lauren reached into the black bag and pulled out Aaron's note. She unfolded it carefully and read it aloud one last time, her voice trembling with quiet reverence. "If I don't make it, send her home. The cat knows the way." She folded the paper and placed it atop the mound of soil before pressing a smooth river stone over it. "Now she does," she said softly. "She always did." Nate rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, Doc." Lauren gave a faint smile. "We did good." They turned to leave, but something caught Lauren's eye. A flicker of movement deeper in the trees. A small shape barely visible between the trunks. At first she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but then she saw it clearly. A young bobcat, smaller than Luna had been, its coat the same pale gold. It stood still, watching them. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Nate followed her gaze and nodded slowly. Looks like someone came to say goodbye. The young bobcat tilted its head, its eyes glinting amber in the sunlight. It didn't move closer, but it didn't run either. It stood there for several heartbeats before giving a low, soft chuff, a sound so familiar it sent a chill down Lauren's spine. Then it turned and slipped back into the trees, vanishing like a shadow into light. Lauren stood frozen, her hand pressed to her chest. "You think that was—" Nate didn't let her finish. "I think that was her legacy," he said. They walked back down the trail without speaking. The world felt different now, lighter, but also infinite, as if the boundary between the seen and unseen had thinned just enough to remind them they were never truly alone. When they reached the trucks, Nate paused and looked back toward the ridge. "You know, people in town will talk about this for years." Lauren smiled softly. "Let them. Some stories are meant to be told." As she climbed into her car, she glanced once more at the black bag on the seat beside her. She touched the worn leather and whispered, "Thank you." The drive down the mountain was quiet. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the winding road. When she reached the bend where they had first seen Luna stumble into the hospital lights, Lauren slowed the car and stopped. The snow there had melted completely, revealing a patch of dark earth and pine needles. She got out, the air crisp against her face, and stood for a moment, breathing it all in. The hospital's roof glimmered faintly in the distance below, its windows catching the evening sun. She smiled faintly. "You led us home, wild one," she whispered. "Now rest." And as she turned to leave, the wind rose again through the pines, carrying a sound that was neither roar nor growl, but something softer, something eternal. A chuff. It faded slowly, carried by the breeze, but it lingered in her heart like a promise. By the time Lauren reached the hospital, the last light of the day had disappeared. The mountains glowed faintly under the rising moon. She parked near the emergency entrance, the same doors where it had all begun, and for a long moment, she just sat there, listening to the hum of the generator and the faint rustle of trees beyond. The world outside was still, but inside her, something had shifted forever. Not all rescues end in tragedy. Some end in faith. And sometimes faith doesn't come from the heavens at all. It comes on four paws with golden eyes through the snow, reminding us that even the wild has a heart. Winter in Silverpine was fading. By mid-March, the snow had thinned into soft white patches along the hillsides, and the rivers that once froze solid now carried the sound of running water again. The mountain town, once silent under storm clouds, had begun to breathe with life. Outside Silverpine Medical Center, the air smelled of thawing pine and wet earth. A new sign stood near the hospital gate, a small bronze plaque mounted on stone. It read, "In memory of the wild savior for reminding us that love can find its way home." People from town often stopped there now. Some brought flowers. Others simply stood in silence, unsure why the memory of a single bobcat stirred something deep inside them. For Dr. Lauren Hayes, that memory had never left. It had been 6 weeks since the storm. The hospital had settled back into its steady rhythm of emergencies and recoveries. But there were moments, quiet moments, when Lauren still found herself glancing at the glass doors, half expecting to see a golden blur appear from the snow again, dragging that black bag behind it. This morning, she stood by the window in her office, looking out at the mountains glowing in early spring light. A knock sounded on her door. "Come in," she said. The door opened, and Nurse Clara stepped inside, smiling. "You've got visitors." Lauren turned, puzzled. "Visitors?" Clara nodded toward the hallway. "A special pair." Lauren followed her out into the corridor and stopped. Emma Cole stood there, wrapped in a soft blue coat, her baby cradled in her arms. The child's cheeks were pink from the cool air, her tiny hands clutching at the fabric of her mother's scarf. "Oh, Emma," Lauren said softly. "You're here." Emma smiled. "We wanted to see you before heading up to the ridge. Nate's waiting outside. He says the trail's clear now." Lauren's eyes warmed. "You're going to the site?" Emma nodded. "Yes, to say thank you." The baby cooed softly, and Lauren reached out, letting the child curl a tiny hand around her finger. "She looks stronger," Lauren said. "She is," Emma whispered. "Her name's Hope." Lauren's breath caught. "Hope?" Emma smiled faintly. "It felt right. After everything, I think it's what she was meant to be." They stood there for a long moment, the quiet between them saying everything words couldn't. Then Emma's eyes flicked toward the window. "You ever go back up there?" Lauren shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to, but part of me felt like the mountain didn't need me anymore." Emma looked down at her daughter. "Maybe it doesn't, but I think it remembers you." The words stayed with Lauren as she watched Emma leave. Through the glass, she saw Nate waiting by the truck, waving once before helping Emma climb in. The baby's laughter floated through the open window like the first true sound of spring. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the ridge, Lauren finally drove back toward the pines. The road wound through familiar bends, past places that had once been hidden under snow and fear. The cabin where they'd taken shelter still stood, half collapsed, but standing nonetheless. A few birds flitted through the open rafters, their wings catching the light. Lauren parked near the clearing and stepped out, her boots crunching softly on the damp ground. The air smelled of pine sap and earth, warm, forgiving. At the edge of the woods, the memorial stone still rested where they had buried Luna. Moss had begun to creep around its base, and a few wildflowers, small white blossoms, had sprouted nearby. Lauren knelt beside it, brushing away a fallen pine needle. "Hey there," she murmured. "It's been a while." The forest was still except for the wind, whispering softly through the branches. "I brought something," she continued, unzipping her coat pocket. She pulled out a small envelope, sealed with a single strip of tape. Inside was a photograph, the one Emma had sent her last week. It showed Emma sitting in the hospital garden, sunlight on her face with baby Hope sleeping in her arms. In the corner of the photo, the memorial plaque gleamed faintly. Lauren placed the picture at the base of the stone. "She's growing fast," she said. "You'd like her." For a moment, she closed her eyes, and in the gentle hum of the forest, she could almost hear it, the soft, steady chuff of a bobcat somewhere beyond sight. She smiled. "You're still watching, aren't you?" A twig snapped behind her. Lauren turned, half expecting to see Nate, but what she saw instead made her breath catch. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, a small bobcat stood watching her. Its fur was lighter than Luna's, a silvery gold that shimmered in the dappled light. It didn't move closer, just tilted its head, studying her. Lauren's heart swelled with an ache that wasn't sorrow. It was recognition. "Hello there," she said softly. "You're not afraid, are you?" The young bobcat blinked, its gaze steady and calm. Then it stepped forward once, paws silent against the earth. For a heartbeat, it locked eyes with her, and in those golden depths, Lauren saw something achingly familiar: trust. Then, with the grace of a whisper, it turned and slipped into the trees, vanishing into the forest's golden haze. Lauren remained still long after it disappeared. The sound of the wind through the pines carried a low, melodic hum, like a heartbeat echoing through the valley. As she rose, the first rays of the setting sun broke through the treetops, casting the clearing in amber light. The black bag she had left weeks ago now lay half covered in moss, its zipper glinting faintly. like an eye catching the last light of day. Lauren reached down and brushed her fingers across it, smiling through the tears that filled her eyes. "Goodbye, Luna," she whispered. "You kept your promise." When Shiho looked up again, the sunlight had shifted, turning the snowmelt into liquid gold. It flowed down the hill in tiny streams, glimmering as it wound its way toward the valley below, toward home. Hours later, as darkness settled over Silver Pine, the town lights flickered to life one by one. In the hospital lobby, the janitor paused for a moment by the new plaque, reading the words engraved there. He didn't know the full story, but he felt something when he looked at it. Something calm, something pure. Out beyond the hospital, high on the ridge, a faint sound echoed through the night air. A soft, rolling chuff that faded into the distance. And somewhere deep in the forest, under a canopy of silver stars, a young bobcat paused at the edge of a moonlit stream. It raised its head, ears flicking, eyes bright. Then it stepped forward, disappearing into the darkness where the water glowed faintly with the reflection of dawn's first promise. The mountains held their silence. The river carried its song, and the story of the wild, the one written in blood, snow, and faith, continued on. Lauren would never hear that sound again, but she would always feel it. In the soft rhythm of a heartbeat, in the cry of the wind through the pines, in the steady pulse of life that refused to fade. Because some echoes don't die, they just find their way home. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Type 1. If you believe love can cross any distance, even between the wild and the human. Type 0 if you're still speechless, just taking it all in. Your words keep these stories alive. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel, turn on the bell, and join us for the next true story from the heart of the wild. Because out here, every heartbeat tells another miracle.